A distracted employee accidentally bumped into an elegant man. He was fascinated by her beauty. Before we explore all the details of this incredible story, tell us where you're following us from and the time. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss a thing, and let's embark on this journey together. The autumn morning wrapped around Boston like a worn blanket, familiar yet somehow different today. Brianna Monroe's fingers tightened around her coffee cup, black, 2 sugars, as she hurried through the quiet streets toward Wellness Bridge Physical Therapy. The clinic's modest sign came into view, its letters slightly faded against the brick building that housed countless stories of healing and hope. At 23, Brianna carried herself with a presence that turned heads, though she remained oblivious to the effect she had on others. Her natural curls caught the early morning light, bouncing with each determined step. Today, like most rushed mornings, she'd pulled them back into a makeshift bun, a few rebellious strands framing her face. Her dark brown eyes, sharp and observant, scanned the street as she walked, her mind already running through the day's tasks. Her outfit, high-waisted jeans, a structured navy blouse, and her favorite gold hoop earrings, reflected her careful balance between professionalism and personality. The clothes were chosen with precision from her modest wardrobe, each piece a testament to her ability to make something simple look elegant. "Morning, Mrs. Davidson," Brianna called out to the elderly woman who always arrived early for her 8 a.m. session. The familiar routine of unlocking the clinic's door, switching on lights, and booting up the ancient computer system followed like a well-rehearsed dance. The reception desk was her command center, though sometimes it felt more like a fortress. From here, she juggled impatient patients, temperamental insurance companies, and doctors who barely acknowledged her existence. Her fingers moved automatically to straighten the stack of forms in the top drawer, a nervous habit that surfaced whenever her mind was troubled. Today, that trouble had a name: bills. Her mother's latest medical tests had arrived yesterday, along with their accompanying costs. The numbers danced mockingly in her head as she arranged the day's appointment folders. Each manila folder represented another hour she couldn't spend at her mother's bedside, another day postponing her own dreams of returning to school. Already reorganizing those drawers? The warm voice of Dr. Reeves, the clinic's owner, broke through her thoughts. The older woman leaned against the reception desk, her silver hair pulled back in a neat bun, kind eyes crinkling at the corners. "You know, one of these days, you're going to have to tell me your filing system secrets." Brianna managed a small smile. "No secrets, Dr. Reeves, just good old-fashioned Virgo neurosis. Well, whatever it is, it keeps this place running." Dr. Reeves paused, her expression shifting to something more serious. "Did you think about what we discussed? About the administrative position opening up?" The question made Brianna's heart skip. She had been preparing for months, taking online courses in healthcare administration during her lunch breaks, studying management techniques after her mother fell asleep at night. "Yes, ma'am. I've updated my resume and—" The clinic's door chimed, cutting through their conversation. Brianna looked up and time seemed to stop. He filled the doorway like a shadow coming to life. Tall, remarkably so, with broad shoulders and an athlete's build barely contained by his crisp white shirt and tailored pants. But it was his eyes that caught her off guard, green-gray, intense, carrying a weight that seemed to pull at something deep in her chest. His dark hair was perfectly trimmed, his full beard neat and professional, yet there was something raw about his presence, something that didn't quite fit with his polished exterior. "Mr. Hawthorne, Doctor." Reeves stepped forward, her voice warming with welcome. Right on time. Brianna's mind raced to catch up. Marcus Hawthorne, the new physiotherapist. Of course, she'd processed his paperwork last week, but somehow the name on those forms hadn't prepared her for the reality of the man himself. She stood, gathering the orientation materials she'd prepared, but her heel caught on the chair's wheel. The world tilted, papers flew, her coffee cup wobbled precariously on the desk's edge. And then strong hands were steadying her, catching her before she could fall. Time crystallized in that moment. His hands were warm through the fabric of her blouse, solid and sure. The scent of his cologne, something clean and understated, mixed with her spilled coffee. Their eyes met, and Brianna felt something shift in the air between them, like the moment before lightning strikes. "I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to—" she started, but her words tangled as she noticed the coffee stain spreading across his pristine white shirt. "It's fine," he said, his voice deep and quiet, with an edge of something she couldn't quite read. His hands dropped away from her arms as if burned, and the loss of contact felt strangely significant. Brianna, Why don't you show Mr. Hawthorne to his office while I grab him a spare shirt from the storage room? Doctor, Reeves suggested, already moving toward the back of the clinic. I think we still have some from the clinic's promotional event last spring. Brianna nodded, grateful for the moment to compose herself. She bent to gather the scattered papers, very aware of how he stepped back, maintaining a careful distance. When she straightened, she found him watching her with an unreadable expression. This way, Mr. Hawthorne, she managed, her professional mask sliding back into place. She led him down the corridor, past treatment rooms where early morning sunlight painted rectangles on the floor. Your office is at the end of the hall. We've updated the equipment according to your specifications. He followed in silence, his footsteps measured and controlled. Everything about him seemed controlled, she realized, like someone who had learned the hard way what happened when things spun out of orbit. At his office door, she turned to hand him the orientation packet. Your schedule for today is light. Just 2 patients this afternoon. Dr. Reeves wanted to give you time to settle in. Their fingers brushed as he took the papers, and Brianna felt that same electric awareness spark between them. Thank you, Ms. Monroe. His voice was formal, distant, but his eyes lingered on her face for a moment too long. Then he was gone, the office door closing with a soft click that seemed to echo in the empty hallway. Brianna stood there for a moment, her heart beating an unfamiliar rhythm. Then she straightened her shoulders and walked back to her desk, where reality waited in the form of ringing phones and insurance forms. But as she settled into her chair, she couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted in her carefully ordered world, like a book knocked slightly off-center on a shelf, or a picture frame tilted just enough to catch the eye. Nothing obvious, nothing dramatic, just the quiet certainty that things would never be quite the same. She opened her drawer to reorganize the forms again, finding comfort in their familiar order. Outside her window, Boston was waking up, the street filling with people rushing toward their own stories. But here, in this moment, Brianna Monroe had the strange feeling that hers was just beginning. What she didn't know, couldn't know, was that down the hall Marcus Hawthorne stood at his office window, staring at nothing, his fingers absently tracing the coffee stain on his shirt. And for the first time in a very long time, the weight of his grief felt just a little lighter, though he wasn't ready to understand why. The evening light was fading when Brianna finally allowed herself to exhale. The clinic had emptied, save for the quiet hum of the air conditioning and the occasional shuffle of papers from Dr. Reeves's office. Her fingers moved methodically over the keyboard, finishing the day's insurance claims, but her mind kept drifting to the closed door at the end of the hallway. Marcus Hawthorne had spent his first day moving like a ghost through the clinic, speaking only when necessary, his patients responding to his quiet authority with a mix of respect and curiosity. She'd watched him from the corner of her eye, noting how he seemed to carry silence with him like a shield. The vibration of her phone pulled her attention away from her thoughts. Tasha's name flashed on the screen, accompanied by 3 dancing emojis. Girl, you better not still be at that desk. Tasha's voice crackled through the speaker, full of life and warning. It's almost 7. Brianna glanced at the clock, guilt settling in her stomach. I'm just finishing up. Mom's nurse is there until 8. Tasha's skepticism was palpable, and it has nothing to do with trying to avoid telling me about the new doctor everyone's talking about. Physical therapist. Brianna corrected automatically, then cursed under her breath as Tasha's triumphant laugh filled the line. So there is something to tell. Spill it. Is he as fine as Mrs. Rodriguez from the morning shift claims? She texted me saying he looks like he walked straight out of a magazine. Brianna's eyes drifted to the hallway again. He's professional. Professional? Tasha's voice rose an octave. That's all you're giving me? After I spent my entire lunch break hearing about how this man has arms like... I spilled coffee on him, Brianna interrupted, heat rising to her cheeks at the memory. First thing this morning, all over his white shirt. The silence on the other end lasted exactly 2 seconds before Tasha burst into laughter. Only you, B. Only you could meet a fine man and baptize him in caffeine within the first minute. It's not funny. I looked like a complete... Brianna's voice caught as movement in her peripheral vision made her freeze. Marcus stood in the hallway, his broad frame silhouetted against the dim evening light. Their eyes met, and for a moment she forgot how to breathe. I'll call you back, she whispered into the phone, ignoring Tasha's protests as she ended the call. Marcus approached her desk with that measured walk of his, each step deliberate as if he was counting them in his head. He'd changed into the clinic's logo shirt after the morning's incident, a simple grey polo that somehow made him look even more imposing. Ms. Monroe, he said, his voice low and controlled, I wanted to return these before leaving. He placed a stack of patient files on her desk, each one annotated with precise handwriting. Thank you, Mr. Hawthorne. She reached for the files, careful not to let their fingers brush. How was your first day? Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, perhaps, at the personal nature of the question. Productive, he answered after a pause. Then, as if the word wasn't enough, he added, different from my last clinic. It was the most he'd said to her all day. Brianna found herself wanting to hold on to this moment, to unravel the layers of meaning beneath his careful words. Different can be good, she offered softly. His eyes met hers again, and this time there was something else there, a vulnerability that made her heart skip. Sometimes, he agreed, his voice barely above a whisper. The sound of Dr. Reeves's office door opening broke the spell between them. Marcus stepped back, his walls visibly rising again. Good evening, Miss Monroe. Good evening, Mr. Hawthorne. She watched him leave, his shoulders straight, his steps never faltering. Only when the front door closed behind him did she realize she'd been holding her breath. He's carrying a lot, Dr. Reeves's voice made her jump. The older woman stood beside her desk, her eyes gentle with understanding. What do you mean? Dr. Reeves settled into the chair beside Brianna's desk, her movement slow with end-of-day fatigue. Marcus was one of the most promising therapists in his field, published papers, spoke at conferences. Then his wife died in a car accident last year. He took a leave of absence, disappeared completely. When he applied here, I almost couldn't believe it. The information hit Brianna like a physical blow. Suddenly, everything about him made sense. The controlled movements, the careful distance, the weight in his eyes. I didn't know, she whispered. Of course not. It's not something he talks about. Dr. Reeves patted Brianna's hand. I'm only telling you because you'll be working closely with him and, well, sometimes understanding helps. Brianna nodded, her throat tight with emotions she couldn't name. Thank you for letting me know. Just... Dr. Reeves stood, adjusting her bag on her shoulder. Be patient with him. He's still finding his way back. After Dr. Reeves left, Brianna sat in the growing darkness, her mind full of new understanding. The coffee incident replayed in her head, his steady hands catching her, the way he'd pulled back as if burned. She thought of her own carefully constructed walls, built from years of putting everyone else's needs before her own. Her phone buzzed again, a text from the nurse reminding her that her mother had taken her evening medication. Reality crashed back in, and Brianna began gathering her things. As she locked up the clinic, she couldn't help glancing down the street, wondering which direction he had gone, whether he too was heading home to an empty apartment filled with memories. The bus ride home was a blur of streetlights and thoughts she couldn't quiet. When she finally walked through her front door, the nurse greeted her with a tired smile. She's had a good day, the nurse reported, gathering her coat. Ate well, did her exercises. She's been asking for you. Brianna found her mother in the living room, wrapped in her favorite blanket, the TV playing softly in the background. Hey, Mama. There's my girl. Her mother's smile was weak but genuine. You're late today. New therapist started at the clinic, lots of paperwork. Brianna settled onto the couch, automatically reaching to check her mother's temperature, to adjust the blanket around her shoulders. Her mother's knowing eyes studied her face. And what? And there's something different about you today. I can see it. Brianna thought of Marcus's eyes, of the way the air seemed to change when he was near, of the sadness he carried, and the strength it must take to keep moving forward. It was just a long day, Mama. Nothing different. But as she moved through their evening routine, heating up dinner, organizing medications, helping her mother to bed, Brianna couldn't shake the feeling that everything was different, not in grand, sweeping ways, but in the quiet spaces between heartbeats, in the moments when silence spoke louder than words. Later, lying in her own bed, she stared at the ceiling and thought about grief, about how it shaped people like water shapes stone. She thought about Marcus Hawthorne and wondered if he was awake too, haunted by memories of a life that no longer existed. Her phone lit up with another text from Tasha. You still owe me details. Lunch tomorrow? Brianna smiled despite herself, typing back a quick yes. She needed Tasha's light, her unwavering ability to see hope in every situation. Because tomorrow she would walk into that clinic again, and she would see him, and now she would know about his loss, about the reason for his silence, about the weight he carried. And somehow knowing made everything more complicated and simpler at the same time. She closed her eyes, letting the distant sound of traffic and her mother's breathing from the next room wash over her. Tomorrow would come with its own challenges, its own moments of collision and retreat. But for now, in the quiet of her room, Brianna Monroe allowed herself to feel the strange mix of emotions stirring in her chest: compassion, curiosity, and something else she wasn't ready to name. Outside, Boston slept, its streets quiet under a blanket of stars. And somewhere in this same city, Marcus Hawthorne sat in his sparse apartment, looking at an old photograph of a smiling woman he could no longer touch, wondering why, for the first time in a year, the pain felt just a little less sharp, a little less consuming. Neither of them knew it yet, but their worlds had already begun to orbit each other, pulled together by forces as inevitable as gravity itself. And sometimes in the space between heartbeats, between coffee spills and careful words, between grief and hope, love finds its way in, not with a bang, but with a whisper so soft you might miss it if you weren't paying attention. The lunch rush at Rosie's diner was in full swing, the clatter of plates and hum of conversations filling the small space. Brianna sat across from Tasha in their usual booth, watching her friend attack a plate of loaded fries with her characteristic enthusiasm. The sun streaming through the window caught the gold highlights in Tasha's braids, making them sparkle as she gestured emphatically. "So you're telling me," Tasha said between bites, her honey-colored eyes sparkling with mischief, "that this man hasn't said more than 10 words to you since the great coffee incident? After 3 whole days?" Brianna pushed her salad around her plate, avoiding her friend's knowing gaze. "He's professional, Tash. It's not like we're supposed to be having heart-to-heart conversations between appointments." Tasha wiped her hands on a napkin, her silver bangles jingling. "And that's why you've been checking your phone every 30 seconds? Because it's so professional." Heat crept up Brianna's neck. "I'm waiting for the nurse to update me on Mum's new medication schedule." "Right. And I'm just working 2 jobs because I love being sleep-deprived." Tasha leaned forward, her expression softening. "B, when was the last time you actually looked at someone? I mean really looked, not just as another responsibility to manage." The question hit too close to home. Brianna thought of Marcus's eyes, of the way he moved through the clinic like someone trying not to disturb the air around him. "It's not like that," she said quietly. He's been through something big." Understanding dawned on Tasha's face. "The way you've been through something? Always carrying everyone else's weight?" Before Brianna could respond, her phone buzzed. Actually, the nurse this time. She read the message and felt her shoulders tense. "Mom's having a rough day. The new medication is making her dizzy." "Go," Tasha said immediately, already signaling for the check. "I've got to head to the salon anyway. Mrs. Peterson's roots won't fix themselves." Outside the diner, Tasha pulled Brianna into a tight hug, her familiar scent of coconut oil and hair products wrapping around them both. "Just don't close yourself off to possibilities, okay? Even broken people deserve chances." The words followed Brianna back to the clinic, echoing in her mind as she settled behind her desk. The afternoon schedule was full, and she immersed herself in the familiar rhythm of checking in patients, filing insurance claims, and keeping the carefully orchestrated dance of appointments flowing smoothly. It was during a rare, quiet moment that she heard it. Music drifting from the back of the clinic, not the usual bland instrumental tracks they played during therapy sessions, but something different, something real. Before she could stop herself, her feet carried her toward the sound. She found herself at the door of treatment room C, where Marcus was preparing for his next patient. A small Bluetooth speaker sat on the windowsill, playing what she recognized as classical piano music. He looked up as she appeared in the doorway, his hands stilling over the fresh towels he was arranging. For a moment, neither of them spoke. "Chopin," she said finally, surprising herself. "Nocturne in E-flat major." Something shifted in his expression, surprise followed by a flicker of genuine interest. "You know classical music? My mum used to play." The words came out soft, weighted with memory. "Before she got sick, she taught piano lessons from our living room." Marcus's movements slowed, became more deliberate. "Used to," he repeated, and she heard the understanding in his voice, the recognition of loss, of before and after. "She can't control her hands well enough anymore," Brianna explained, not sure why she was sharing this with him. "But she still listens. Says music speaks when words aren't enough." He turned to face her fully then, and for the first time, she saw his walls lower slightly. "Your mother sounds wise." "She is." Brianna hesitated, then added, "She's having a rough day today. New medications." Marcus nodded, and something in his posture changed, became less the distant professional and more the healer she glimpsed when he worked with patients. "Medication adjustments are always difficult," both for the patient and, he paused, his eyes meeting hers, for those who care for them. The understanding in his voice made her throat tight. Before she could respond, the front desk phone rang, its shrill tone shattering the moment between them. "I should," she gestured vaguely toward the reception area. "Of course." He turned back to his preparations, but then called softly, "Ms. Monroe?" She paused in the doorway. "There's a therapy technique we sometimes use with patients struggling with medication side effects. Nothing complex, just some simple exercises to help with dizziness and balance. If you'd like, I could—" "Yes," she said, perhaps too quickly. "I mean, that would be helpful. Thank you." He nodded once, and she hurried back to her desk, her heart beating an unfamiliar rhythm. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of appointments and paperwork, but she was acutely aware of his presence, of the music that continued to drift through the clinic, changing from Chopin to Beethoven to something modern she didn't recognize. At closing time, she found a neatly folded paper on her desk. Inside, in his precise handwriting, were detailed instructions for the exercises he'd mentioned, along with a note. "Music helps with the timing. Nocturnes work best." She stared at the paper, at the care taken in each written word, and felt something shift in her chest, like a key turning in a lock she hadn't known was there. That evening, as she helped her mother through the exercises, the familiar strains of Chopin's Nocturne playing softly from her phone, Brianna thought about healing, how it comes in different forms, how sometimes the smallest gestures carry the most weight. "He must be special," her mother said suddenly, her eyes sharp despite her fatigue. Whoever gave you these exercises, whoever put that look in your eyes." Brianna focused on supporting her mother's arm through the next movement. "He's just being kind. Kindness is never just anything, baby." Her mother's hand squeezed hers weakly, especially when it comes from someone who understands loss. Later that night, after her mother had fallen asleep, Brianna sat at their old piano. She didn't play, hadn't touched the keys in years, but she ran her fingers over them gently, thinking about music and silence, about speaking without words. Her phone lit up with a message from Dr. Reeves. "Administrative position interviews start next week. You're first on the list." The opportunity she'd been working toward, the chance for better pay, for stability, for evening classes at the community college, it was all within reach. She should have felt elated. Instead, she found herself thinking about green-gray eyes and careful words, about classical music drifting through clinic hallways. Across the city, Marcus sat in his sparsely furnished apartment, a glass of untouched whiskey on the table beside him. The wedding photo he usually kept face down was upright tonight, his late wife's smile frozen in time. But for the first time in a year, he found himself thinking not about what he'd lost, but about dark eyes that saw too much, about strength wrapped in vulnerability, about music speaking when words couldn't. Neither of them knew it yet, but they were both taking small steps, away from their carefully constructed solitudes, towards something neither was ready to name. And sometimes, in the space between notes in a nocturne, in the silence between written words, in the pause between breaths, the heart finds its own rhythm, one that has nothing to do with what's planned and everything to do with what's possible. The interview was scheduled for 9 a.m., but Brianna had been at her desk since 7, every folder precisely aligned, every document triple-checked. The autumn rain tapped against the clinic's windows, creating a rhythm that matched her nervous heartbeat. "Your mother's medical bills aren't going to pay themselves," she whispered to her reflection in the computer screen, straightening her blazer, thrifted but elegant, a deep burgundy that made her skin glow. Her curls were styled into a neat updo, professional and polished, though a few rebellious strands had already escaped around her temples. The sound of the front door opening made her look up, expecting Dr. Reeves. Instead, she found Marcus standing in the doorway, rain dripping from his broad shoulders. Their eyes met and something unspoken passed between them. "You're early," he said softly, moving toward his office. "Interview day," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. He paused, turning back to face her. "The administrative position?" She nodded, surprising herself by adding, "My mum's treatments. The better salary would help." His expression shifted, something like understanding darkening his eyes. He disappeared into his office, returning moments later with a small paper cup of water. He placed it on her desk without ceremony. "For the nerves," he explained simply. Then, after a moment's hesitation, "You're more qualified than you think." Before she could respond, Dr. Reeves bustled in, followed by a man Brianna didn't recognize, tall, silver-haired. wearing an expensive suit that seemed to repel the rain. "Brianna, perfect. You're ready?" Dr. Reeves beamed. "This is Mr. Richardson from the board. He'll be sitting in on the interviews today." The morning unfolded like a dream, or perhaps a nightmare. The questions came rapid fire, each one more probing than the last. Brianna answered with careful precision, drawing on years of experience, on late nights studying healthcare administration, on every moment she'd spent making this clinic run smoothly. But something felt off. The way Mr. Richardson's eyes kept sliding past her, the slight curl of his lip when she mentioned her community college courses. She recognized that look, had seen it too many times before. When the interview ended, she knew it in the way Mr. Richardson's handshake was barely a touch, in the way Dr. Reeves wouldn't quite meet her eyes. The rain had intensified by lunch, matching her mood. She sat at her desk, mechanically processing insurance forms, trying not to think about the way Mr. Richardson had looked at the next candidate, a young man fresh out of business school, with the right connections and the right background. "Ms. Monroe." She looked up to find Marcus standing at her desk, his expression unreadable. "Would you mind helping me with something in treatment room C?" Confused but grateful for the distraction, she followed him. The room was empty, the afternoon's first patient not due for another hour. Classical music played softly from his speaker, Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata this time. "What did you need help with?" she asked, noting how the rain cast shifting shadows across his face. Instead of answering, he closed the door and turned to face her. "You didn't get it. It wasn't a question." Brianna felt her carefully constructed walls begin to crack. "How did you—" "I saw your face when they left. I recognized that look." His voice was soft but intense. The look of someone being judged for everything except what matters. The understanding in his words undid her. "I've worked here for 3 years," she whispered. "I know every patient, every procedure, every insurance code. I've taken night classes, studied everything I could about healthcare administration. But none of that matters because people see what they expect to see," he finished, and there was an edge to his voice she'd never heard before. "Because it's easier to stick to their predetermined script than to recognize real merit." She looked at him then, really looked, and saw something she hadn't noticed before. Anger. Not at her, but for her. It made her breath catch. "When Laura, my wife, Kaz, was sick," he said suddenly, the words seeming to surprise even him. The doctors looked at her the same way. Young, female, complaining of pain they couldn't immediately diagnose. They dismissed her symptoms as stress, as anxiety. By the time they found the tumor, he stopped abruptly, his hands clenching at his sides. Brianna moved without thinking, touching his arm gently. He didn't pull away. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, understanding now why he'd become a physical therapist, why he treated every patient with such careful attention. "The point is," he continued, his voice rough, "sometimes the system is wrong. Sometimes the people making decisions are wrong, but that doesn't make you wrong." The music swelled around them, filling the silence that followed his words. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky, but in that room something else was building, something electric and inevitable. "I should get back to work," Brianna said finally, though she didn't move. "Yes," he agreed, but his eyes held hers, saying something entirely different. The moment was broken by voices in the hallway, the next patient arriving early. They stepped apart, the professional mask sliding back into place for both of them. But something had changed. As Brianna returned to her desk, she felt different. Not healed exactly, but understood. And sometimes understanding is its own kind of healing. The afternoon passed in a blur of patience and paperwork. When evening came, she found another note on her desk, written in Marcus's precise hand. "Some battles are worth fighting twice. The position at Memorial Hospital is still open. Their loss could be your chance." She stared at the note, something stirring in her chest. Through the window, she could see the rain had finally stopped, leaving the streets gleaming and new. On her bus ride home, she made 2 decisions. First, she would apply for the Memorial Hospital position, not because Marcus suggested it, but because she refused to let one rejection define her worth. Second, she would stop pretending she wasn't falling for a man who understood loss as intimately as she did. At home, her mother was having a good day, sitting up in bed with a novel. "You're quiet tonight," she observed as Brianna checked her vitals. "Just thinking about changes," Brianna replied, her mind full of grey-green eyes and careful words. "Changes can be good," her mother said wisely, "especially when they make your eyes light up like that." Later, as she prepared for bed, her phone buzzed with a text from Tasha. "Heard about today. Want me to come over and plot revenge?" Brianna smiled, typing back, "No revenge needed. But I could use help with a job application." Across the city, Marcus sat at his desk, staring at an old photo of Laura. "I told someone about you today," he whispered to the image. "Really told them. And for the first time, it didn't feel like betrayal." He thought about Brianna's gentle touch on his arm, about the strength he saw beneath her vulnerability, about how helping her fight her battles made him feel more alive than he had in months. Neither of them slept much that night, their minds full of shared moments and unspoken words, and sometimes, in the quiet hours between midnight and dawn, between rain and clearing skies, between loss and possibility, the heart begins to remember how to hope. The call came at 3:47 a.m. Brianna was already awake, putting the finishing touches on her Memorial Hospital application. When her mother's nurse's number flashed on the screen, the world seemed to stop spinning. "She's asking for you," the nurse said, her voice tight with concern. The fever spiked suddenly and her blood pressure. Brianna was moving before the sentence finished, muscle memory guiding her through the motions. Shoes, keys, jacket. The night air hit her face as she ran to the street, desperately scanning for any sign of an available cab. A familiar car slowed beside her, Dr. Reeves's silver Volvo. "Get in," the older woman commanded, already opening the passenger door. "The nurse called me too." The hospital corridors were a blur of harsh fluorescent lights and antiseptic smell. Her mother looked small in the emergency room bed, her dark skin ashen, her breathing labored. The doctors spoke in clipped tones about infection, about compromised immune systems, about waiting and watching. Dawn found Brianna slumped in an uncomfortable chair, her carefully formatted job application forgotten on her laptop at home. Dr. Reeves had left an hour ago, extracting a promise from Brianna to call if anything changed. "Miss Monroe?" She looked up to find Marcus standing in the doorway, still in his running clothes, concern etched on his features. The sight of him, solid, real, unexpected, made her throat tight. "Dr. Reeves told me," he explained softly, moving into the room. "I was out for my morning run, and the hospital was on my route." The casual lie was kind. The hospital was nowhere near his usual running path. She'd overheard him discussing his route with a patient just last week. "You didn't have to come," she managed, but her voice betrayed her. He didn't respond immediately, instead studying the various monitors attached to her mother, his professional knowledge evident in his gaze. "The fever's down," he noted. "That's good." Brianna nodded, too exhausted to speak. Without asking, Marcus disappeared and returned minutes later with 2 cups of coffee. He placed one in her hands, the warmth seeping into her cold fingers. "The memorial application was due today," she said suddenly, the words spilling out. "I was just finishing it when—" "I'll call them," he interrupted gently. "Explain the situation, they'll understand. You don't have to." "I want to." His voice was firm, but tender. "Let someone help Brianna, just this once." The use of her first name, the first time he'd ever said it, broke something inside her. The tears she'd been holding back since the phone call finally came, hot and silent. Without hesitation, Marcus pulled her into his arms. She cried against his chest, feeling his heart beat steady and strong through his running shirt, smelling the morning air still clinging to his skin. His hands were warm on her back, grounding her, holding her together as she fell apart. "I can't lose her," she whispered into his shirt. "I can't—" "Shh," he soothed, his chin resting on top of her head. "You're not alone in this." A small sound from the bed made them both turn. Her mother's eyes were open, watching them with a mix of pain and knowing tenderness. "Mom!" Brianna pulled away from Marcus, wiping her eyes as she rushed to the bedside. "How are you feeling?" "Like I interrupted something important," her mother said weakly, but her eyes sparkled with their old mischief. Marcus stepped forward, his professional demeanor sliding back into place, though his eyes remained soft. "Mrs. Monroe, I'm Marcus Hawthorne from the clinic. It's an honor to finally meet you, though I wish it were under better circumstances." "Ah," her mother smiled, "the one who likes Chopin." Color touched Marcus's cheeks, a sight so unexpected it made Brianna's heart skip. "Your daughter mentioned you were a piano teacher." "Were," her mother corrected gently. "But music never really leaves you, does it, even when everything else changes?" Something passed between them then, an understanding that Brianna couldn't quite grasp, but felt in her bones. Marcus nodded, a gesture heavy with meaning. The moment was interrupted by the arrival of the doctor, charts in hand. Marcus squeezed Brianna's shoulder once before stepping back. "I'll take care of the memorial situation," he promised quietly. You take care of what matters. She watched him leave, his broad shoulders disappearing down the corridor, before turning back to the doctor's update. The news was cautiously optimistic. The infection was responding to treatment, the fever continuing to decrease. Hours later, with her mother sleeping peacefully and the crisis past, Brianna checked her phone to find several messages. From Tasha, "On my way with real food and fresh clothes. Don't argue." From Dr. Reeves, "Take all the time you need, we've got things covered." And from Marcus, "Memorial HR extending the deadline. Application on your laptop has been submitted. Hope you don't mind that I had Tasha send it. Interview scheduled for next week. Your mother's right about music never leaving. Some things, once they touch us, become part of who we are." She read his message twice, understanding he wasn't just talking about music. Her mother stirred, and Brianna took her fragile hand, thinking about strength and vulnerability, about how some people walk into your life exactly when you need them most. "He's good for you," her mother murmured, not opening her eyes. "He sees you." "I know," Brianna whispered, and for the first time, she let herself fully acknowledge the truth of it. Later that evening, after Tasha had come and gone with her whirlwind of energy and care, after the night nurse had arrived and the hospital had settled into its quieter rhythms, Brianna found herself in the hospital chapel. She wasn't particularly religious, but something about the peaceful space called to her. Soft piano music drifted through the door, a volunteer playing hymns on an old upright piano. The melody was simple but touching, and Brianna closed her eyes, letting it wash over her. In the music, she heard echoes of her mother's stronger days, of Marcus's quiet understanding, of all the moments that had led her here. Her phone buzzed one last time. Marcus again. "Music helps heal what words can't touch. Get some rest, Brianna. Tomorrow is another day." She smiled, tucking the phone away, and let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, some breaking points are really beginning points in disguise. And sometimes, in the space between crisis and calm, between professional distance and personal connection, between what we fear and what we hope, love grows stronger than we ever thought possible. The Memorial Hospital lobby gleamed with morning light as Brianna stepped through its revolving doors, her heels clicking against the polished floor. A week had passed since her mother's hospitalization, and life had settled into a new rhythm, one that felt both fragile and stronger than before. "You've got this," Tasha had declared that morning, helping Brianna choose the perfect interview outfit, a deep blue dress that made her look both professional and powerful. Show them what they missed out on at the clinic. Now, sitting in Memorial's waiting area, Brianna touched the small note in her pocket. Marcus's handwriting neat and sure. "Trust your strength. It's what makes you extraordinary." He'd left it on her desk that morning, along with a cup of coffee from their shared spot, Hidden Bean. The interview itself was unlike anything she'd expected. Instead of the dismissive glances she'd endured at the clinic, the panel of administrators at Memorial listened intently as she outlined her ideas for improving patient care coordination. They asked meaningful questions about her experience, her education plans, her vision for the future. "Your understanding of both the administrative and human aspects of healthcare is impressive, Ms. Monroe," the head administrator commented, studying her resume. "It's rare to find someone who can bridge that gap so effectively." Walking out 2 hours later, Brianna felt lighter somehow, as if a weight she'd carried for years had finally shifted. Her phone buzzed with a text from the home nurse. "Your mother's doing well. Ask me to remind you to breathe." She smiled, typing back a quick thank you, before heading to the clinic for her afternoon shift. The familiar street seemed different today, filled with possibility rather than limitation. The clinic's atmosphere hit her as soon as she walked in. Something was wrong. Dr. Reeves stood at the reception desk, her face drawn with concern, as she spoke in hushed tones with Marcus. They both looked up when Brianna entered, their expressions making her heart skip. "What happened?" she asked, dropping her bag at her desk. "Corporate's selling the clinic," Dr. Reeves said without preamble. "They're consolidating resources, focusing on larger facilities. We have 3 months." The news landed like a physical blow. This place wasn't just a job. It was a community, a family of sorts. She thought of their patients, many of whom had been coming here for years, who trusted them, who needed them. "There has to be something we can do," Brianna said, her mind already racing through possibilities. "The patient base, the location." "Actually," Marcus stepped forward, his voice carrying an edge of something she couldn't quite read, "there might be." Dr. Reeves looked at him sharply. "Marcus?" He ran a hand through his hair, a rare gesture of uncertainty. "I've been thinking about opening my own practice. Something smaller, more focused on individual care. When Laura, after everything, I promised myself I'd build something meaningful, something that puts people before profits. But that would take significant investment, Dr. Reeves pointed out. The equipment alone, I have savings, he said quietly, and connections with medical equipment suppliers from my previous work. It's not impossible. Brianna watched his face as he spoke, seeing the passion beneath his usual reserve. This wasn't a sudden decision, she realized. He'd been planning this, waiting for the right moment. The staff would need to be minimal at first, he continued, his eyes meeting Brianna's. Just the essentials, someone who understands both the administrative side and the human element, someone who knows our patients, our community. Her heart stuttered as she understood what he wasn't saying directly. You'd need a partner, she heard herself say, someone invested in the long-term vision. The word partner hung in the air between them, heavy with multiple meanings. Yes, he agreed softly, still holding her gaze. I would. Dr. Reeves looked between them, a small smile playing at her lips. Well, she said, gathering her papers, I think I'll let you two discuss the possibilities. Whatever you decide, you have my full support. After she left, silence filled the reception area. Brianna's mind was spinning with implications, with possibilities, with fears and hopes all tangled together. The memorial interview, she started. It went well. I'm not surprised, Marcus said, moving closer to her desk. You're exceptional at everything you do. The compliment, delivered in his straightforward way, made her breath catch. This idea of yours, it's risky. Starting from scratch, competing with larger facilities. Life is risk, he said quietly. I learned that the hard way. But sometimes the biggest risk is not taking one at all. She thought about her mother's words from the hospital. He sees you. Looking at Marcus now, she knew it was true. He saw her potential, her strength, her worth, not as an employee, but as an equal. I need time, she said finally, to think about it, to talk to my mother, to consider everything. Of course, he nodded, understanding as always. But Brianna? Yes, whatever you decide about Memorial or this, it won't change what's growing between us. I need you to know that. The words, spoken in his deep, sincere voice, made her heart race. Before she could respond, patients began arriving for the afternoon sessions, and they both fell back into their professional roles. But something had shifted, like earth moving beneath their feet. As she worked through the afternoon, handling appointments and paperwork with practiced ease, Brianna felt the weight of possibility pressing against her chest. She thought about what it would mean to build something new, something that truly mattered. That evening, as she sat with her mother sharing the day's events over dinner, she felt the pieces of her life realigning themselves into a new pattern. You're glowing, her mother observed, stronger now, but still moving carefully. This isn't just about business decisions, is it? Brianna thought about Marcus's eyes when he'd talked about his vision, about the way he'd said partner, about all the unspoken things growing between them. No, she admitted softly, it's not. Later, alone in her room, she reread Marcus's note from that morning. Trust your strength. The words seemed to hold new meaning now. Her phone lit up with a text from him. No pressure, just possibility. Sometimes that's enough to build on. She smiled, thinking about music and silence, about loss and new beginnings, about the courage it takes to reach for something real. Outside her window, Boston's lights twinkled like stars, and for the first time in years, the future looked not just possible, but beautiful. Across the city, Marcus sat at his desk, surrounded by business plans and equipment catalogues, but his mind was on the way. Brianna's eyes had lit up when he'd said, partner. He touched the wedding ring he still wore, and for the first time it felt not like a chain but like a bridge, from what was to what could be. Sometimes in the space between ending and beginning, between professional and personal, between past and future, love finds its clearest voice, and sometimes the biggest leaps of faith are the ones that lead us home. The Memorial Hospital offer letter sat unopened on Brianna's kitchen table, its crisp white envelope a stark contrast to the scattered papers covered in her neat handwriting, calculations, projections, and possibilities for the new clinic. A week had passed since Marcus's proposal, and she'd spent every spare moment analyzing the choice before her. You're overthinking it, Tasha declared, sliding a fresh cup of tea across the table. She'd arrived an hour ago with takeout and determination, her bright yellow dress a spot of sunshine in Brianna's uncertainty. Your heart already knows the answer. My heart isn't the most reliable decision-maker, Brianna countered. But even as she said it, her mind drifted to that morning at the clinic. She'd arrived early, as usual, to find Marcus already there, his sleeves rolled up as he measured the treatment rooms. He'd looked up when she entered, and something in his eyes made her forget every carefully reasoned argument she'd prepared. "Just looking at possibilities," he'd said softly, and they both knew he wasn't just talking about room dimensions. Now, sitting with Tasha, Brianna reached for the memorial envelope. The safe choice would be— "Safe?" Tasha interrupted, her honey-colored eyes flashing. "Girl, when has safe ever made anyone happy? When has safe ever changed the world?" From the next room, Brianna's mother called out, "Listen to her, baby. She's making sense for once." "I heard that," Tasha shouted back, grinning. "See? Even your mama knows I'm right." Brianna smiled despite herself, remembering how her mother had improved steadily over the past week, her strength returning along with her sharp wit. Just yesterday, she'd caught her mother trying to play the piano, just simple scales, but the sound had filled their small apartment with hope. Her phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Meeting with the equipment supplier tomorrow. No pressure, but if you're interested." Before she could respond, another text arrived. "I miss your voice in the morning meetings. The clinic feels wrong without you there." Her heart jumped at the simple honesty of his words. She'd taken a few days off to think, to plan, to be sure her decision wouldn't be swayed by proximity to those green-gray eyes and quiet strength. "Oh, honey," Tasha said, reading the messages over her shoulder, "you're not fooling anyone. I've seen how you look at him when you think no one's watching." "It's not that simple," Brianna protested, but her voice lacked conviction. "Actually," her mother said, appearing in the doorway with careful steps, "it is that simple. You're just afraid to admit it." Brianna looked at her mother, stronger now but still fragile, still needing care. "Mum, don't you dare use me as an excuse," her mother interrupted firmly. "I didn't raise you to live half a life because you're worried about me. Marcus understands responsibility, understands care. I see it in his eyes when he looks at you." "When did you become such an expert on Marcus?" Brianna asked, surprised. Her mother smiled mysteriously. "He visits me, you know. Brings me books about physical therapy exercises. Talks about music. Yesterday he asked my permission to partner with you, professionally and perhaps more." The revelation stunned Brianna into silence. She thought about Marcus, who guarded his privacy so carefully, taking the time to connect with her mother, to understand her world. "He said something interesting," her mother continued, easing herself into a chair. "He said, some people carry their strength so quietly you have to listen carefully to hear it roar. He was talking about you, baby." Tears pricked at Brianna's eyes. She thought about the clinic, about the patients who trusted them, about the community they'd built. The memorial position would be prestigious, secure, but it wouldn't be hers, not really. Not like the possibility of building something new, something that mattered. Standing abruptly, she grabbed her keys. "I need to go somewhere." Tasha and her mother exchanged knowing looks. "Go get him, girl," Tasha called as Brianna hurried out. The evening air was crisp with autumn's promise as Brianna drove to the clinic. She knew he'd be there. He always worked late on Thursdays, reviewing patient files in the quiet after hours. The clinic's lights were dim, but she could see him through the window, sitting at his desk, completely absorbed in his work. Her heart did that familiar skip as she watched him, remembering every small moment that had led to this one. The door was unlocked. He looked up at her entrance, surprise and something else flickering across his features. "Brianna." She moved to his office with purpose, holding his gaze. "Ask me again." He stood slowly, understanding dawning in his eyes. About the partnership, about everything. The word hung between them, heavy with meaning. Marcus moved around his desk, closing the distance between them with measured steps. "Partner with me," he said softly. "Help me build something that matters. Be the strength I need to make this work." He paused, then added with quiet intensity, "Stay in my life not because it's safe, but because it's right." Brianna felt the truth of it resonate in her bones. "Yes," she whispered. His hands came up to frame her face, gentle but sure. "To which part?" "All of it." The kiss, when it came, felt like coming home. His lips were soft against hers, careful at first, then deeper as she responded. She felt the tremor in his hands, the way his breath caught when she pressed closer. When they finally parted, he rested his forehead against hers. "I've wanted to do that since the day you spilled coffee on me." She laughed softly, her hands still gripping his shirt. "Is that why you kept playing Chopin? To romance me?" "Maybe," he admitted with a small smile. "Did it work?" Instead of answering, she kissed him again, pouring everything she couldn't say into the gesture. When they separated, his eyes were darker, intense with emotion. "We'll need to work hard," he said, ever practical even in this moment. "Starting a new clinic won't be easy." "Nothing worth having ever is," she replied, thinking of her mother's strength, of Tasha's determination, of their shared understanding of loss and hope. Later that night, after lengthy discussions about business plans and dreams, after more kisses that made the world spin, Brianna returned home to find her mother at the piano, playing a simple but beautiful melody. "Chopin?" Brianna asked, recognizing the piece. "Seemed appropriate," her mother smiled. "Did you figure it out?" "Yes," Brianna said, touching her lips where she could still feel Marcus's kiss. "I'm choosing the harder path, the scarier one, the right one." "Good," her mother nodded. "That's my girl." As the music filled their apartment, Brianna thought about strength and choice, about coffee spills and classical music, about the way love sometimes arrives disguised as possibility. Her phone buzzed with a message from Marcus. "Thank you for trusting me, for trusting us." Sometimes, in the space between safety and risk, between what we know and what we dream, between a single moment and a lifetime, the heart makes its boldest moves. And sometimes, choosing the harder path leads us exactly where we need to be. The small storefront on Beacon Street wasn't much to look at yet. Paint peeled from the window frames, and the floor needed refinishing. But Brianna could see the potential. Standing in the empty space, morning light streaming through dusty windows, she could envision what it would become. "The treatment rooms would go here," Marcus explained, his arm warm around her waist as he gestured to the back area. "Reception up front with a small waiting area. It's not as big as the old clinic, but it's perfect," she interrupted, turning to face him. 2 weeks had passed since their first kiss, since she'd chosen this path, and she hadn't regretted it for a moment. "It feels right." His eyes softened as he looked at her, that special smile he seemed to reserve just for her playing at his lips. "You feel right," he said quietly, then cleared his throat. "I mean, you here, planning this. It feels—" "I know," she smiled, reaching up to straighten his collar. The gesture felt intimate, domestic in a way that made her heart flutter. "So, when do we tell the patients?" The question sobered them both. They had 2 months left at the old clinic, 2 months to prepare this space, to transfer patients, to build something new from the ground up. "Dr. Reeves is announcing the closure next week," Marcus said, his hand finding hers. "We can start talking to patients then about the transition." The sound of heels clicking on hardwood made them turn. Tasha stood in the doorway, her bright red blazer a splash of color against the bare walls. "Well?" she demanded, surveying the space with her designer's eye. "Is this the one?" "This is it," Brianna confirmed, watching her friend prowl the perimeter, already sketching ideas on her tablet. "Good, because I've got concepts for days. That wall? Perfect for a statement piece. And these windows, the natural light is everything." Tasha paused, looking at them knowingly. "Plus it's only 10 minutes from B's place. Convenient for late-night paperwork." Marcus coughed, a slight blush touching his cheeks, while Brianna shot her friend a warning look. Their relationship was still new, still precious and private, though anyone with eyes could see the change between them. "The contractor's coming at noon," Marcus said, checking his watch. "We should head to the clinic. Morning appointments." The drive to work was comfortable, filled with quiet discussions about paint colors and equipment placement. At a red light, Marcus reached over and took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "Having second thoughts?" he asked softly. "Not one," she replied, squeezing his hand. The clinic was already busy when they arrived. Brianna settled at her desk, organizing the day's files, while stealing glances at Marcus as he prepared for his first patient. Everything felt different now, charged with possibility. Mid-morning, her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. "Therapy session went well. The new exercises are helping. Your man knows his stuff." Brianna smiled, warmth spreading through her chest. Marcus had insisted on overseeing her mother's physical therapy personally, working with her 3 times a week to rebuild her strength. The way he cared for her mother, with such gentle patience, made Brianna fall a little more in love with him every day. Love. The word had crept up on her, settling into her heart when she wasn't looking. She wasn't sure when it had happened, maybe during those early morning coffee moments, or in the quiet ways he anticipated her needs, or in how he looked at her like she was something precious and strong at the same time. "Ms. Monroe." Mrs. Henderson, one of their elderly patients, approached her desk. "Is it true about the clinic closing?" Brianna hesitated, the official announcement not yet made. But Mrs. Henderson had been coming here for years, trusting them with her care. "Some changes are coming," she said carefully. "But we'll still be here for you." Marcus's voice came from behind her. He moved to stand beside Brianna's desk, professional but present, just in a new location. Same care, same commitment. Sup? Henderson looked between them, understanding dawning in her wise eyes. Together, they confirmed in unison, then shared a small smile at their synchronicity. The rest of the day passed in a blur of patience and preparations. After hours they sat in Marcus's office, surrounded by business plans and permit applications. The evening light cast long shadows across the floor, and soft classical music played from his speaker, their soundtrack now. "We should talk about the ring," Brianna said suddenly, her eyes on his left hand where the wedding band still rested. Marcus stilled, his pen hovering over the paper. "I've been thinking about that," he admitted quietly. "About when Laura would want me to be happy, to live fully again. I just need time," she finished for him, understanding completely. "There's no rush, no pressure. We're building everything else together. This can wait until you're ready." He looked at her then, his eyes full of emotion. "How did I get so lucky?" "You spilled coffee on the right girl," she teased, trying to lighten the moment. "Actually, you spilled coffee on me," he corrected, pulling her from her chair into his lap. "Best thing that ever happened to me." Their kiss was sweet and slow, full of promise. When they parted, Brianna rested her head on his shoulder, breathing in his familiar scent. "We should go," she sighed. "Mum's nurse leaves at 8. "I'll drive you," he said, but neither moved for a long moment. Finally, gathering their things, they walked to his car, hand in hand. The city was quiet, settling into evening, and Brianna felt a deep sense of peace despite all the uncertainty ahead. At her door, Marcus kissed her goodnight, then touched her face gently. "Partner meeting tomorrow?" "The contractor's bringing the final estimates." "Partner meeting," she agreed, loving how the word had taken on new meaning. Inside, she found her mother at the piano, playing softly. "Good day?" she asked, noting Brianna's smile. "The best kind," Brianna replied, sitting beside her mother on the bench. "The kind where dreams start becoming real." Her mother nodded, her fingers still moving over the keys. "He's good for you and you're good for him. Sometimes healing comes in unexpected ways." Later that night, as Brianna reviewed their business plans one last time, her phone lit up with a message from Marcus. "Just found the perfect waiting room chairs. Modern but comfortable. Like us. Practical but with hidden depths." She smiled, typing back, "Are you comparing us to furniture?" His response came quickly. "I'm comparing us to anything that fits perfectly together. Sometimes in the space between what was and what will be, between professional and personal, between healing and being healed, love builds its strongest foundations. And sometimes the scariest leaps lead to the most beautiful landings." The letter from the bank arrived on a Tuesday morning, its contents sending a cold wave through the warmth Brianna had been living in. Standing in her apartment's kitchen, she read it 3 times, her hands shaking slightly. The construction costs for the new clinic had exceeded estimates, significantly. The loan they'd been counting on was now in question, pending further review. 6 weeks before their planned opening, with the old clinic's closure looming, everything was suddenly balancing on a knife's edge. Her phone buzzed. Marcus, his timing uncanny as always. "Meeting with the contractor pushed to 2 p.m. Everything okay? You're usually at the clinic by now." She stared at his message, her throat tight. He'd invested so much already. His savings, his dreams, his heart. How could she tell him that it might not be enough? "On my way," she typed back, gathering her things. But instead of heading to the clinic, she found herself driving to Memorial Hospital. The administrative offices were quiet this early. Linda Carter, the HR director who had interviewed her weeks ago, looked up in surprise as Brianna appeared in her doorway. "Ms. Monroe, this is unexpected." "I'm sorry to come unannounced," Brianna started, her voice steadier than she felt. "But I needed to ask, is the position still open?" Linda's eyes widened slightly. "Actually, yes. Our first choice didn't work out. Are you saying you're interested?" Before Brianna could respond, her phone buzzed again. This time it was Tasha. "Girl, where are you? Your man is looking like a lost puppy at the clinic. Also, the paint samples arrived, and I need your input stat." Reality crashed back in. What was she doing here? This wasn't her anymore. The safe choice, the expected path. She thought about Marcus, about their shared dreams, about all they'd built together in these past weeks. "I'm sorry," she said to Linda, standing abruptly. I shouldn't have come. I already have a position, the best one I could ask for. The drive to the clinic was a blur of autumn colors and racing thoughts. She found Marcus in their future treatment room, surrounded by paint swatches and equipment catalogues, his sleeves rolled up as he measured wall spaces. He looked up as she entered, his face lighting up before concern crossed his features. Hey, you okay? You look... Instead of answering, she held out the bank letter. He read it quickly, his expression growing serious. Ah, he said softly, that's why you're late. Marcus, I went to Memorial, he finished, surprising her. Linda called me. She's an old colleague, wanted to know if I knew you were job hunting again. Shame washed over her. I went there, but I couldn't. He crossed the room in 3 strides, pulling her into his arms. I know, he murmured into her hair. I know you, Brianna. You were trying to find a backup plan, a way to protect everyone if this falls apart. She pressed her face into his chest, breathing in his familiar scent. The loan is just one option, he interrupted gently. I've been making calls all morning. There are other banks, other possibilities. But your saving are just money. He pulled back slightly, lifting her chin to meet her eyes. What matters is this, us, the dream we're building together. As if to emphasize his point, her mother's voice drifted in from the reception area, where she was sitting with Tasha. This shade of blue is all wrong. A healing space needs warmth, not an ice palace. Brianna couldn't help laughing, even as tears threatened. When did she get here? About an hour ago. Tasha picked her up, said we needed her expert opinion on colors. Marcus smiled softly. She's right, you know, about healing spaces needing warmth, understanding passed between them. This wasn't just about paint colors or bank loans. It was about building something that mattered, something that could help heal others the way they'd helped heal each other. I'm sorry, she whispered, for doubting, for going to Memorial. Don't be. He touched her face gently. Your instinct to protect, to plan, to take care of everyone. It's one of the things I love about you. The word hung in the air between them, its weight making her heart skip. They hadn't said it yet, though they both had felt it growing stronger each day. You love me? She asked softly. His eyes, those beautiful green-grey eyes that had first caught her attention all those weeks ago, held hers steadily. More than I thought possible, more than I thought I could ever love again. The kiss that followed was different from their others, deeper, more certain, full of promise and passion and future. When they finally parted, Brianna felt steadier, stronger. I love you too, she whispered against his lips. Good, he smiled, because I have an idea about the loan situation, but it's a little crazy. Before he could elaborate, Tasha's voice rang out. If you two are done making out in there, we need decisions about the reception desk. And Mama B says if you pick that sterile white color, she's disowning everyone. They laughed, the tension of the morning breaking. Walking into the reception area hand in hand, they found Tasha surrounded by fabric samples, while Brianna's mother sat regally in a test chair, directing operations like a queen on her throne. Finally! Tasha exclaimed. Now, about these curtains. Actually, Marcus interrupted, his hand tightening on Brianna's, I have a proposition for everyone. They all listened as he outlined his plan, using the current space's existing features instead of complete renovation, phasing the improvements over time, starting smaller, but with room to grow. It would mean more work initially, more creative solutions, but it could work. Plus, he added, looking at Brianna's mother, we could use a part-time office manager, someone with experience handling difficult personalities and keeping things organized. Someone who might benefit from having a purpose again. Brianna's mother straightened in her chair, understanding dawning in her eyes. Are you offering me a job, young man? If you're interested, he smiled. The exercises have been helping. A few hours a day at your own pace. Tears shone in her mother's eyes as she nodded, unable to speak. Well, Tasha declared, wiping her own eyes, that settles it. New plan, new budget, same dream. Now, about these color schemes. Later that night, after hours of planning and replanning, after Tasha had gone home and her mother had fallen asleep smiling, Brianna sat with Marcus on the steps of their future clinic. You're amazing, she said softly. The way you think of everything. Everyone. He kissed her temple gently. I learned from the best. You taught me that healing isn't just about physical therapy. It's about community, about family, about love. Above them, stars peeked through the city's light pollution, and somewhere in the distance a piano played. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new obstacles to overcome. But tonight, Sitting here with the man she loved, surrounded by the dreams they were building together, Brianna knew that sometimes the biggest leaps of faith led to the most beautiful landings. And sometimes, in the space between fear and faith, between doubt and determination, between what is and what could be, love proves stronger than any bank letter or balance sheet. Because real wealth isn't measured in dollars and cents, but in the hearts we touch and the lives we change, one small step at a time. The morning of the new clinic's opening dawned clear and crisp, autumn sunlight streaming through freshly cleaned windows. Brianna stood in the reception area, taking in every detail they'd worked so hard to perfect: the warm terracotta walls Tasha had insisted on, the comfortable seating arranged in welcoming clusters, the sleek reception desk where her mother would soon preside. 6 weeks of endless work had transformed the space, not into the ultra-modern facility they'd first imagined, but into something better, something that felt like home. Nervous? Marcus's voice came from behind her, followed by his arms wrapping around her waist. He rested his chin on her shoulder, both of them surveying their creation. Terrified, she admitted, leaning back against him. Excited, grateful, everything at once. He turned her in his arms, his eyes soft as they met hers. "I have something for you, before everyone arrives." From his pocket he pulled out a small velvet box. Brianna's heart skipped, then steadied as she saw his expression. Not nervous, just certain. "It's not what you think," he said softly, opening the box to reveal a delicate gold key on a chain. "Or maybe it is, just differently." Inside the box was also a note, written in his precise hand. "To my partner in all things, this is your key to both the clinic and my heart. Both are yours to keep." She touched the key gently, noting how it caught the morning light. "Marcus, I took off my ring last night," he said quietly, and she noticed for the first time his bare left hand. "Not because I've forgotten Laura, but because I'm ready to fully embrace this new chapter with you." Tears pricked at her eyes as he fastened the necklace around her throat, the key settling perfectly against her collarbone. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you too." His kiss was gentle, but full of promise. "Now, let's open these doors and start changing lives." The morning unfolded like a carefully choreographed dance. Their first patients, transferred from the old clinic, arrived to find a space that was both familiar and fresh. Brianna's mother held court at the reception desk, her natural warmth making everyone feel welcome, while Tasha flitted around adjusting last-minute details between her salon appointments. Dr. Reeves arrived mid-morning, her arms full of flowers. "For new beginnings," she said, hugging them both. "I'm so proud of what you've created here." Mrs. Henderson, their first patient of the day, emerged from her session beaming. "This place," she declared to the waiting room at large, "has heart. Real heart." Brianna, overhearing from her small office, felt tears threaten again. Through her open door she could see Marcus working with a patient, his hands gentle but sure as he guided them through exercises. He caught her watching and winked, making her heart flutter just like it had that first coffee-spilled morning. The day passed in a blur of emotion and activity. By closing time, exhaustion mingled with satisfaction as they gathered in the break room. Brianna, Marcus, her mother, Tasha, and Dr. Reeves, sharing cake and champagne. "To Healing Hearts Physical Therapy," Dr. Reeves toasted, her eyes twinkling at the name they'd chosen. "May you heal many." "To family," Brianna's mother added, looking stronger and happier than she had in months. "Both blood and chosen." "To love," Tasha declared with her characteristic directness, "because let's be real, that's what built this place." After everyone had gone, Brianna and Marcus stood in their clinic, their home away from home. The setting sun painted the walls gold, and somewhere down the street, piano music drifted through an open window. "Dance with me?" Marcus asked softly, holding out his hand. "Here? Now? Why not? It's our place, our moment." She stepped into his arms, letting him guide her in a slow circle, as Chopin's familiar notes floated around them. "Remember when you first started playing classical music in the treatment rooms?" she asked. I was trying so hard not to fall in love with you. Playing music was the only way I could express what I was feeling. And now," he pulled back slightly, looking into her eyes, "now I don't have to hide anything. I can just love you fully and completely. Even when I reorganize your files," she teased. "Especially then." His smile was tender. "Even when you try to carry the world on your shoulders, or when you worry too much, or when you spend an hour color-coding the appointment calendar. That calendar system is perfectly logical," she protested, laughing. I know. He kissed her softly. It's perfectly you, and you're perfect for me. They swayed together as the last light faded, neither rushing to end the moment. Through the window, Boston's lights began to twinkle, and the piano music played on. What are you thinking? He asked, noting her contemplative expression. About coffee spills, she said honestly. About how sometimes the biggest changes in our lives start with the smallest moments. About how grief can lead to healing, and healing can lead to love. He nodded, understanding as always. Life has a way of bringing us where we need to be, even when the path seems unclear. Like bringing a quiet physical therapist and a two responsible receptionists together? Exactly like that. His arms tightened around her. Though you're much more than a receptionist now, you're a businesswoman, a partner, a healer in your own right. She touched the key resting against her throat, thinking about doors opening, literally and figuratively. We did it, didn't we? Really did it. We're doing it, he corrected gently. Every day, every patient, every moment together. This is just the beginning. Later that night, after final checks and locked doors, after kisses in the parking lot and promises for tomorrow, Brianna sat with her mother at their old piano. Her mother's fingers, stronger now from therapy and purpose, picked out a simple melody. He's going to propose soon, her mother said matter-of-factly. I saw him looking at rings on his lunch break. Brianna smiled, her heart full. I know, and I'm ready. Of course you are, her mother nodded. Some loves are worth waiting for, worth building slowly, carefully, until the foundation is unshakable. Across the city, Marcus stood in his apartment, soon to be their apartment, once he found the courage to ask that too. The ring box sat on his dresser, not yet ready, but promising. Like their love, like their clinic, like their future, all works in progress, all growing more beautiful with each passing day. And sometimes, in the space between what was and what will be, between loss and discovery, between a coffee spill and a key on a chain, love writes its own story. Not with grand gestures or perfect moments, but with patient hearts and healing hands, with quiet understanding and brave new beginnings. Because sometimes the greatest love stories aren't about instant passion or dramatic declarations. Sometimes they're about two people who understand loss, who choose hope, who build something meaningful together. Sometimes they're about coffee spills and classical music, about keys and promises, about hearts that heal by helping others heal. And sometimes they're about finding home in another person's eyes, about building dreams into reality, about turning endings into beginnings, one small moment at a time. 1 year later, the evening sun painted long shadows across the grand piano that now took pride of place in Healing Hearts Physical Therapy's waiting room. Brianna's mother sat at the keys, her fingers moving with renewed confidence as she played for the small gathering of family and friends. The clinic had grown beyond their dreams over the past year. What started as a leap of faith had blossomed into something extraordinary, not just a place of physical healing, but a sanctuary where broken spirits found their strength again. Brianna stood in the doorway of what was now their shared office, watching Marcus help their last patient of the day, an elderly veteran learning to walk again. Her hand absently touched first the key that still hung around her neck, then the elegant engagement ring that had joined it 3 months ago. The proposal had been perfectly them, quiet, meaningful. During a late-night planning session when they were surrounded by patient files and takeout containers, I can't imagine building any more of this life without you as my wife, he'd said simply, holding out the ring. Marry me, she'd said yes before he could finish asking, and they'd celebrated with their usual evening ritual, a shared cup of coffee from Hidden Bean, where it had all begun. Stop daydreaming and help me with these decorations. Tasha's voice broke through her reverie. Her friend, now the owner of her own thriving salon, was directing the setup for tomorrow's anniversary celebration. These photos aren't going to hang themselves. The walls would soon be covered with pictures chronicling their first year, patients achieving their goals, staff celebrations, quiet moments caught on camera. At the center would be their favorite, the entire team on opening day, hope bright in their eyes. I still can't believe you're letting me play tomorrow, her mother called from the piano, her voice stronger than it had been in years. The regular work schedule, carefully managed by Marcus, had done wonders for both her physical and mental health. Are you sure you don't want someone more professional? Mom? Brianna laughed, moving to sit beside her on the bench. There's no one more perfect for our anniversary celebration than you. Your mother's music is part of our story now, Marcus added, joining them after seeing his patient out, just like Chopin. He wrapped his arms around Brianna from behind, and she leaned back into his familiar warmth. His left hand was bare now, his wedding ring to Laura carefully stored away, not forgotten, but transformed into a cherished memory rather than a weight. "Speaking of stories," Tasha interrupted, her smile mischievous, "when are you two going to start the next chapter? That new treatment room would make a perfect nursery in a few years." Brianna felt Marcus's small intake of breath, knew he was thinking of the conversation they'd had just last night about future plans and growing families. They had time. They had each other. Everything else would unfold as it should. "One story at a time," Brianna replied, but she couldn't help smiling at the possibility in those words. The last sunlight streamed through windows, now decorated with children's artwork, gifts from their youngest patients. The walls that had once been bare now held healing and hope. The space that had once been empty now overflowed with love. Her mother's fingers moved across the keys, playing the nocturne that had somehow become their song. Marcus hummed along softly, his chest vibrating against Brianna's back. Tasha swayed as she hung the last photo, her bright smile reflecting the joy they all felt. This was their masterpiece, not just the clinic but the family they'd built, the lives they'd touched, the love they'd grown. It hadn't always been easy, but the best stories rarely were. And as the music filled their healing space, as the day settled into evening, as love wrapped around them like a familiar melody, Brianna knew that some endings were really just beautiful beginnings in disguise. The coffee stain from that first morning was still barely visible on the waiting room floor. They'd decided to keep it, a reminder that sometimes the best things in life start with little accidents. Sometimes they start with spilled coffee and borrowed shirts, with quiet music and careful words, with hearts brave enough to try again. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, they start with two people who understand that love isn't about perfect moments, but about perfect understanding, about healing together, growing together, building dreams one small step at a time. As the last notes of the nocturne faded into silence, Marcus kissed her temple softly and whispered, "Ready to go home?" Brianna looked around at their creation, at her mother's smile, at Tasha's exuberant energy, at the space they'd filled with so much hope and healing. Then she looked up at the man who had helped her build it all, whose love had given her the courage to dream bigger than she'd ever dared before. "I am home," she whispered back, and in his eyes, she saw her truth reflected. Home wasn't just a place. It was this feeling, this love, this life they'd built together. The future stretched before them like an unwritten song, full of possibility and promise. But for now, in this moment, they had everything they needed: each other, their family, their dreams made real, and the endless potential of tomorrow. And somewhere in the distance, as if the universe itself was offering its blessing, the soft notes of a piano drifted through the evening air, playing a melody that sounded remarkably like new beginnings. The end. Between silences and songs showed us that sometimes love is born in the most unexpected moments, through small gestures and mutual understanding. Brianna and Marcus discovered that healing can come in many forms, and that building something meaningful requires courage to take the first step. Have you ever experienced a seemingly ordinary moment that completely changed the course of your life? Just as a simple coffee spill transformed Brianna and Marcus's story, what was your defining moment that seemed small at the time, but proved to be transformative? Your participation in the channel is very important. Please leave your opinion in the comments. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like and comment your thoughts. Your participation is very important to us. See you next time.